So good afternoon or good evening to everyone, depending on your time zone. I'm Piali. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Republic. So thank you for joining today's Fireside Chat with Arlan Hamilton and Randi Zuckerberg, aptly named It's About Damn Time, telling powerful personal stories. We do have a couple of housekeeping items that I'm supposed to say, so you're all on mute during the presentation. If you have any questions or comments, just pop them into that Q&A section. We are recording the event, but the recording will be available in the coming weeks on the SheWorx website, as well as our newsletter. And of course, our legal disclaimer. This session is for educational and discussion purposes only. The views expressed during this webinar are those held by the individual participants and not necessarily their employers, which I guess in this case, you guys are also your own voice and the founders of your company. So I'll leave it at that. So for those of you who are new to Republic, we're an investment platform that gives power to the people to invest in the future they believe in by providing access to startups, real estate, blockchain, and video game investments. SheWorx is a member of the Republic family. SheWorx is focused on bridging the gap between female founders and funders. All of our events are quite tactical. We're a strong and growing network of women entrepreneurs who are shaping the future of tech and investing. You can learn more about upcoming events like this in our program on sheworx.com and via the handle @SheWorx across all social platforms. So I'm excited for today's event. It's focused on finding and trusting your personal voice as well as owning that narrative. And there's no better person to discuss this with than Arlan Hamilton, who is the founder of Backstage Capital, a venture firm that's dedicated to minimizing funding disparities in tech by investing in high potential founders who are people of color, women, or LGBTQ. Now I know you guys have seen all the press about Arlan, but she will tell you this did not happen overnight, right? Arlan started Backstage in 2015 with no money, no contacts in Silicon Valley, no background in finance, not even a college degree. But now she's got more than 12 million that she's raised from the likes of Mark Cuban to Mark Andreessen. And she's invested in more than 150 startups led by underestimated founders. She's the author of It's About Damn Time, which is an amazing inspirational tactical book for business entrepreneurs and investors. And she's also the podcast host of her own podcast called The First Million, which I saw Arlan has a fun new theme song. So Arlan's found success, she's found fame, she's found haters, but she's remained true to her voice. And I love that you say, we've come for cake, not the crumbs. And I'm excited to learn more from you during this conversation. Now, our moderator for today's conversation is also a rock star who understands media and the power of voice, Randi Zuckerberg. Randi was an early employee at Facebook, where she created Facebook Live, which is now used by more than 2 billion people around the globe. She creates award-winning content through her company, Zuckerberg Media. She's the best-selling author of not just one, but 4 books, producer of multiple television shows, theater productions, and hosts a weekly radio show on SiriusXM, which I know, Arlan, you've also been a guest on. While Randi is a mom to 3 children of her own, she likes to call herself a professional mom to entrepreneurs because nothing gives her greater joy than working closely with the startups and founders. So we are honored to have you both and appreciate your ongoing efforts and support of SheWorx and Republic. And so Randi, I'll let you take the stage.
Perfect. Well, it's such a pleasure, Piali. Thank you so much. And Arlan, I wish we were together in person, but I'll settle for seeing your beautiful face here. And thanks to all the incredible women who are joining us today. So please do put your questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to be taking a look at that during the conversation. So Arlan, it's about damn time. I love your book. I see a giant poster right behind you. Your book is based on the premise of being underestimated. So maybe just take us through your incredible story.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, first of all. Randi, thanks for participating. I feel like Republic feels like family now because of this journey we've been on. Um, and I think a lot of it was in the bio, but I'll try to do a quick version. So grew up in Dallas, which I know is being hit really hard right now with this weather. So anybody who is watching this and also dealing with the weather, appreciate you from all over the country. Grew up in Dallas, moved to California, bounced around a lot actually around the country, but California is where I landed. And 2011 or so, started really dialing in on startups from afar, from a distance, really figuring out what startups were and becoming enamored with it, but very quickly also learning about the disparities in capital between what white men get and what everybody else gets. And of course, it's different tiers of that, but it didn't make much sense to me because white men make up a third of the country, and we're getting more than 90% of the funding. And the people who I was talking to, including white men, thought that that was ridiculous too. And so originally, my idea was to just kind of let funds know about this like disparity, because I thought if they knew it, they'll fix it. Of course, because I was very naive back then. But the more I realized, the more I talked to people and realized, oh, okay, there's probably going to need to be even more of a bridge than there is currently. And that's when I decided didn't have any money, but I was going to figure out a way to raise millions of dollars and then invest that into founders who were underrepresented and now what we call underestimated.
Well, I love it. And thinking back on some of my own experiences going into Silicon Valley, I mean, I had probably one of the easiest entries into Silicon Valley you could have as a woman because I am a white woman. It was my brother's company where I was going into work. And even then, I still felt completely invisible and still felt like I had to claw my way through Silicon Valley. I often say that the best thing I had going for me was having a man's name because I would email people and they
Yep.
thought they were getting emailed by a dude and they'd get a meeting. So if even
Same.
if I yeah, so if even I was feeling that way, Arlen, I mean, how did you even get yourself into rooms in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a good point that you're making, and I think it's a very generous point that you're making because it's true. It's like the elephant in the room, right? But if you had a hard time, hopefully some people who don't believe me will believe you, right? But the way that I set myself apart was that I was not afraid of anybody not liking me, and I wasn't afraid of being, I'm not afraid of being wrong in general. I think that's a really, if you can figure that out, you have a long way to go, right? I mean, you can go far. But I was really convicted in what I was saying and what I was believing. And I thought, you know, what I'm saying is right. I feel that I'm on the right side of history here. And it may take longer than I would have hoped, but I'm going to get there. So it was just sort of having that very strong core and understanding that if I could pull this off, it was going to positively affect a lot of people. And so that was a lot of fuel for it. And and just kind of, I think, side note, humor helped a lot because having that observational humor just really helps you in these ridiculous situations when you're standing there and you're like, as a woman, you're saying something, and then 2 minutes later somebody else says the same thing, and they're like, oh, like literally applauding them, or patting them on the back.
That's brilliant.
um, it happens still today, and it's just something that if you don't laugh about it, you will cry about it. And so a few of those things mixed together, ultimately just knowing this focus of this is right and the way things are have to change.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really been incredible to see your meteoric rise. I mean, it's so well deserved, and it's incredible to see when good things happen to someone with such a great vision. But I mean, you have repeatedly made history. You were on the cover of a Fast Company recently. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You just raised, I think, $1 million on Republic in like hours, which is amazing. So, I mean, what's next for you? What's looking into the future, what does success look like a year from now in your universe?
A year from now, I mean, a year is a very short amount of time in my view. I think about things in decades, and so, but as we can see, a lot can happen in a year. So we will continue to raise capital for both operations and more so for funds that go into companies. We'll do a lot of what we've been doing before, which is like laying this foundation of seeding people early and being with them on their trajectory, and then being there when they have their inflection moments, where we have many examples where we were either the first in or very early in, or in when the headlines had faded, and we come in $25,000 check, and at the time people were saying, you talked about that kind of sort of hype thing about it, the haters, people were saying, what are you doing? What, making these small investments? Why are you making so many investments and this and that and the other? And now you start to see all of the control to the chaos and the method to the madness, which is where we came in at 25K at the right time. Now we have allocations for millions, if not tens of millions, and we are the first call people make in a lot of cases. So what we have to do, and what part of, if you are an investor in our Republic Reg CF, appreciate you, thank you. What we have to do to make your investment work is have more capital under management, and that's always been the plan from day one since the decision to be a fund. And so the first is, yes, it's 12, 13, $14 million for the first 5 years. But for the second 5 years, what I really believe will happen is that we will raise in the hundreds of millions of dollars when it comes to LP capital, which is the fuel for the fire. And that is when things get turbocharged. And because of all of our foundation, we are not, it is not unwieldy. It is not like we're at the wheel and we're just flailing because we have all this capital. No, we set such a foundation, and now it's just let's go all in that direction.
A lot of people in the chat loving your emphasis on the long game, and I completely agree. And I think it's that, I mean, that's part of what continues to make you so successful. I'm curious, in this past year of craziness, what have been some of the biggest changes that you had to make with your business, and how did you keep the momentum going, even with all this, with remote culture and with everything?
For us at Backstage, we had always been a remote team, and we had co-working spots here and there, certainly, and so some of us would work together. But by and large, from size 3 to size 40 and everything in between, we've always had a culture of remoteness, if that's a word. And so we have people in California and Detroit and New York at one point, and Midwest and all of that. And so for us, when that part happened, we were actually really well prepared for it. And I'm very grateful for that, because that was just one less thing we had to figure out. So we immediately thought about, well, what about our portfolio of companies who as a group, anyone who is interested in, not every single company, but anyone who's interested may not have that same thing going. Or if they do, maybe it's one or two people working siloed, and maybe getting together as a group might be helpful to them. So that's what we immediately did to just let everybody know that we were all in this together. And we tried to be helpful in giving resources, accounting resources, PPP access, legal resources, things like that, to just make, if you felt alone, hopefully you didn't after that. And then just, as the weeks and the months wore on, I think personally what helped me was pivoting my podcast for a few weeks into this COVID hub. Because I was just trying to figure it out, and I was just talking directly to the audience and just saying, okay, this is what's going on, and I just read about this, and this is what we might not want to get worried about, too worked up about. And doing that was really cathartic and kept me pretty steady, because I tend to get really still in chaos. It's just what I'm used to doing. And that was really helpful. So I appreciate everyone who listened and gave feedback during that time, because I think it helped heal a lot of the damage being done. And then over time, I think so. I am a paranoid person. I just am, and I'm also I also don't like germs so much. So a couple of things helped us, I think. So if you might remember this, Randy, I don't shake hands. Like I only fist bump, and I was doing that.
Now everyone's like, that's so smart.
Yeah, so I was doing that for years before this, and so I think that. But people also like my paranoia. People kind of make fun of, but sometimes it's helpful because when people were saying, "Oh, we're going to be back in the summer, everything's going to be fine in the summer," and this was in like March or April, I was like, "Oh no, it's going to be 2021 is what you need to be looking forward to." So I was able to kind of share my paranoia with our team and with anyone who would listen in our portfolio and say, let me be wrong. I'd love to be wrong about this, but let's prepare for as if I'm right. And let's think about how do we all sort of prepare ourselves if this is a year plus situation and not a couple of months like some people were trying to make it.
It's funny. I actually am such a germaphobe too, so I appreciate that. And I had just had a new baby right before the pandemic, and my older kids were going back to school, so I had already stocked up on like Purell and Lysol. And the first sign of a sniffle, I'm like, "You wear a mask, like
Yep,
you mask
yep.
up." And now I'm like, now everyone thought I was crazy, and now I was like, okay, I'm gonna have the last laugh
Crazy
on.
like a fox.
But it's I want to talk a little bit about your investment thesis. I'm curious, how your investment thesis has evolved over time, or maybe it hasn't. Maybe it's still the same as you started, and how what your process is now when you really consider an investment.
It hasn't changed much, and I think that that doesn't mean there's a lack of imagination. I think that it was actually just a lot of that early instinct was proven out. Definitely learned a lot over the years. Definitely have been proven wrong in some areas over the years, which is a good thing. But ultimately, it's someone even asked me today, like, how do you diligence someone like at scale? You're seeing so many companies. I'm like, it's the exact same process for me at least, which is a very everything's happening on the outside where a lot more is coming our way, but if we're looking at a deal, we're looking at a deal and kind of judging it on its merit. So we've always thought since day one that Black and brown and other investors, women investors, LGBTQ investors, etc., who were underrepresented, were underestimated, and they were doing things, going to great lengths to do things that were sort of handed to others. And if that is the case, and they've gotten so far with so little, what would happen if they did more? If they got more, right? And that's always just been kind of where we stand on things. And we believe that today's underrepresented are tomorrow's tech titans. So we want to be in early. And we didn't even invent that. I mean, if you look at companies like Y Combinator, 15 years ago, they're having Chili Tuesdays with a few guys, hanging out, and no one would have pointed to them and said, "Oh, that's going to be the next guy who owns the homepage of the internet, Alexis Ohanian, or that's going to be Sam Altman, or that's going to be et cetera, Airbnb CEO." And so we're doing the same thing. And if you look at it like that, we're about 5 or 6 years into a 15-year really interesting mark. So imagine 10 years from now, what you see at YC, imagine what we're doing, and maybe even at an escalated rate, just because things have been accelerated. I mean, so the diligence is the same, and now we do have an incredible amount of process behind the scenes that we did not have before.
Well, and now that, I mean, like you said, you're the first call that a lot of entrepreneurs think. How does a founder stand out when they're pitching you?
Yeah, it's not so much in their pitch itself. It really comes down to, like, a person can have a company that is not interesting and do all these acrobatics and make a big splash, and it's not really going to change things, at least for me, right? But if a person can be very quiet and introverted and awkward, but have a really great core product or a great idea or a great company, and that's going to speak for itself with me. And so Like it has to start with the company itself. And I'm also someone who's like a big fan of you not taking on venture funding. Like I think people should bootstrap for as long as possible. I also think, have been saying this since 2017, that crowd investing is the future. And because you have this democratized way of looking at things rather than one or two or four people on your cap table who get to tell you what to do or have an opinion, and that's what you have to run with. So I'm looking at it from that lens of how do I get them not to take my money? And so it's about like you have to really convince me with, hey, we're doing a really great job over here. And it doesn't have to be fancy or flashy. It doesn't have to be you've reached millions of people or you had all this money to begin with. It just needs to seem to me that with more, given more, um, you are going to really shine and really reach a lot of people, and that the numbers work, and that it should be venture backed and not something else.
For sure. And everything you're saying seems to be just resonating so much with everyone. The chat is lighting up. We have a question that came in around how executive women or just how any women can really help you in this mission. Obviously writing checks whenever possible, but how what are some other ways that everyone can be helpful?
Yeah, I would say the reason we opened up our raised on Republic is like, just to kind of give a little background on it. The raise is to backstage, and the alternative would have been we just sort of the few of us at backstage would have just shared in the upside, and I would have been the person, still am, but would have been the person who got the majority of that capital. And so basically took some of my equity and my upside and gave it to the crowd to buy into, and you're investing in that. And so it's not just something that we took lightly or that it doesn't have a lot of impact on us. It's a very impactful thing. It gives us the fuel and the wings to do our thing for a few years without having to worry about other people's whims, right? We've done the thing where for 5 years or more we've kind of waited on the rich people's whims. Are they going to give us money or not? This is now putting it into the hands of the crowd. So as an executive and as a woman, backing us at Republic is a huge deal. Join our wait list if you didn't get in on the first round. We'll keep talking to you about what's next. That is huge for us. And then ultimately, I think that Black and Brown founders especially are over mentored, and I'm not the only person that says that, but I think we are over mentored. But I do think that there's a great peer mentorship that's still valuable. I think there are connections. So sometimes people say, well, how can I mentor your portfolio? I'm like, you can make connections for our portfolio. Like you can connect them to customers and to people who can be helpful in these certain situations, but sort of standing from afar and telling them what, back in my day sort of thing is not as useful today as it would have been, and especially for this group. So going to backstagecapital.com, and signing up to be on our mentor platform really does mean a little bit more than that. And then the last is a lot of times bringing me and or others from backstage into your companies to speak, either internally or externally, is very helpful in a lot of ways. And so we get to spread our message. It helps us with deal flow. It helps us with LP flow, like investors in our funds, because just more people learn about us. And we try to be as helpful in the other direction with the information.
It's really amazing. And again, in the chats, people are saying that just your care for founders is really unprecedented with what anyone else is doing in investment. And it really does shine through your passion. I want to go back for a little bit on what you said, that VC funding is not for everyone. I couldn't agree more. I love how equity crowdfunding democratizes the process in such a beautiful way. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how founders should think about raising money and how they discover what is the right process for them.
Yeah, it's going to be different for everyone. I have an online academy, arlensacademy.com, and one of my flagship course that I started last April is how to raise capital for your company from scratch. And really is a Trojan horse to bootstrapping. So you go in and it's 14, 15 hours of content, and a third of it is about bootstrapping first. And in that, I talk about more in depth who should raise or how you should think about it because it is individual. But the thing is, like, bootstrapping, I think, is great for strategy, and it doesn't have to be and or. So I think some people think, well, I either do this on my own or I raise. There's some ways you can think about it is, when you invest, when you get investment, first of all, you're getting people's opinion with that investment. So just remember that. Second of all, those capped notes that you're doing, that safe and that note and this and that, they're adding up. You don't even realize how much they're adding up. You may take 10,000 here, 50,000 there, 100,000 there, and by the time you go to a priced round, you would have given away 20, 30, 40, 50% of your company, sometimes even more. By the time you get to a priced round that actually gives you enough capital to really take off. And so anytime I get a chance, I say, go back and look at what you're trying to raise, what you think you need to raise. Those think and need are like interchangeable. Like, what you think you need to raise is probably wrong. It can probably be changed because you have that power. Earlier I talked about being at rich people's whim. It's not a great feeling. I've been there, I still am there, but it's not a great feeling. So imagine if you right now think you need to raise $200,000 and you have to go to even the crowd or this person, Angel, or this person, and they're going to, and you think that's what you need. Imagine if in 24 hours you really figured out you only needed 50,000 to do what you need. How much power did you just take back? How much control and leverage did you just build for yourself in that 24-hour period where you put pen to paper and said, that thing that I think I need to pay for, maybe I can do myself, or maybe I can think about, instead of giving this person who just has a bank account equity, what if I give a person equity who is actually working on this with me? That same equity or different amounts. What if I split that up? And then you just take things back. You recalibrate, and it's just really important to make sure, because I will say this one more time, because I'll probably say it for the rest of my life, but for 35 years, I was broke of my 40. No money, no way to know where I'm going to sleep a month from now, sometimes the next day. I have now seen money, and I have access to it. I can raise it. I can earn it. I know how to do that. There is no amount of money that is worth the heartache and changing yourself and playing that game. There's just not, especially for a startup where you start with 100% of your company. You start fully leveraged, and then we little by little give it away. So I would say think about it that way, and also think about, instead of going to VC, is there a way, if you think you need $1 million from a venture capitalist, is there a way to need 150,000 from a Republic, from a crowd fund of any platform?
Such great real talk and real advice, and I couldn't agree with you more, because when you raise that funding, you get a boss. And for so many people, the whole appeal of starting your own company is to be your own boss. And I actually had an experience once where I raised money and then gave it back. I mean, talk about a bad because it was from the wrong person, and I immediately realized that. And that was, I mean, wow, talk about a painful experience. But uh, there was a question, I'm going to find it again, that I really loved, that came in from Euphali, and she was saying, as a woman, how do you get comfortable promoting yourself? I think so many of us as women, we're taught to kind of be quiet and be in the background, and promoting yourself if you're a guy is awesome, but promoting yourself as a woman is aggressive. And how do
Yeah.
you balance that?
Be aggressive. If promoting yourself as a woman comes across as aggressive, then overnight, just like Jeannie, I'm aggressive now. Who cares? Like, what does it matter if somebody thinks you're aggressive? I mean, we have, how many years do we have in our lifetime? No matter what you believe about the afterlife or what you believe about, reincarnation, any of that, in this body, in this life, you have only a certain number of years. Do it, live it the way you want to. And I mean, I also have the luxury of not like conforming to gender norms, just because I don't. But um, I think another way of thinking about it too is, it's easy for me to say that just because I have that confidence. But another way of thinking about it when you're starting from scratch with the confidence thing, is it's never just about you. So when you're making noise, or when you're speaking up for yourself, or when you're asking for a promotion, or asking for investment, or pitching your company to anyone, you're never just doing it for yourself only. You're doing it for the people in your life who you care about, who may benefit from your success. And even more broadly, and even more prevailing than we may think about, is you're doing it for the next person who may just get a better deal and better break because you dare to speak up. And I call it loosening the pickle jar. So you may not get the pickle jar open, you may not get the thing you need in that moment, but you might have loosened it for the next person who is in your image, or who you want to kind of see win. And that helps. I mean, it doesn't help every time. Sometimes it's just hard, and you have to kind of deal with it. But when I started thinking about it like that, when I had that chorus of the people who might benefit from me winning, that changed everything for me. If this were only about me, I would have been done years ago with this, because it is difficult and it's not easy to put yourself out there. But when you think about it like that, man, the world opens up for you. So even what's perceived as failure is repurposed in that moment, because you did a little bit more for the last person, for the person behind you.
For sure. There's some questions coming in around getting over rejection and imposter syndrome, which is very real. How have you handled that in your career, and is that still something that you are nervous about when you walk into a room, or have you?
Oh no, no. Um, you know why? I mean, I even say in my book, it's about damn time, available now. It's about damntime.com. I even say in my book that imposter syndrome is like a myth. It's something that's kind of put on us. When did we learn about imposter syndrome and give it a name? Because really, I think the idea of imposter syndrome is supposed to be like, I'm not supposed to be here because I'm not as qualified as I should be, or this is not my time, or something like that. But man, I've just met too many people who are, I'm not going to pick on white men, but they can take it, who are white men or white or whatever. And they got to places and you're like, how did they get there? And you're gonna sit back and you're gonna shoot yourself in the foot and decide that you're going to hold yourself back. Man, walk in the room. And here's another thing: if anybody, Black women, Latinx women, women of color, whatever you're being paid today is a discount. You're being paid at a discount. So when you go in and ask for a raise, or you go and do all this, you're actually asking just to be paid your fair share, what was supposed to be paid to you this whole time. You were being generous and you gave them a discount, and now you're going to get what you really need to be paid. Right? So I'm going to get a lot of people fired today. I know, but but you got the one life to live. So
Do do you think that, I mean, there's been some recent debate that female founders are being held to higher standards, and that if they make a mistake, they come crashing down further with,
Mm.
cases like Away,
Mhm.
Luggage, Reformation. I mean, media scrutiny is harsh. It's harsh on everyone, but do you think it's harsher on female founders?
Yeah, so that is a very complex issue, right? Because, and I actually recorded a podcast episode right when the Away stuff was happening, because one of the co-founders, Jen, is an investor in Backstage, and I didn't really know Steph that much, but and they had a different kind of vibe depending on who you asked, and so it's like an hour long, 45-minute long me talking, because it's so complex. Because I think both things are happening. I think we have to understand that it's possible for more than one thing to be happening at the same time. So I believe that some of the people who, in that case and other cases where it's been white women, where they have said there's been some tomfoolery here, some shenanigans about race, because these women were given a lot of money really fast and weren't sensitive to people of other races and other cultures, and we are speaking up about that as employees. I believe that can be true, and it can also be true that the downfall and the kind of sitting on the sidelines and just hoping that they fail by media and by people who are here already and don't want anything new can also be happening. So it can be, you know, there's a lot of things that happen that don't need to be happening. They need to be fixed. I'm giving no one a pass. But I also know that if in a lot of cases these were men, because we've seen it happen, they get to fall on cushier, pillows, basically. There's no one, I can't imagine Adam Newman being turned away from being given, a speaking gig right now, or coming to somebody's party because they want to know this guy. I can't imagine people who did far worse than Adam Newman not being embraced as a man, like sexual harassment and worse, not being embraced and able to just work today. But when it happens to women, it's like they had their shot, they're canceled, it's done. They were so bad we told you so. Because there are a lot of people waiting for them to fail. So both things happen at the same time. They're not going to get a pass. They have to figure themselves out. They're adults. But for all of that to be happening while you're being watched by people who want you to fail, you fail faster and you fall further.
Such a good point. I'm taking questions kind of in real time here, so keep throwing your questions into the chat. We have a question from Abby Rich, who's asking if you can share some tips on how to pitch yourself to media outlets. You've been so successful in getting such great media attention. Is there anything that we can learn from that?
I'll tell you, it's almost like when someone who's really thin tries to tell me about how to lose weight. But I'll tell you, I don't really pitch press. They come to me, and so that's been the case for a long time. And so it kind of is the same thing as like getting capital for your company. It's like really do something great that it has that substance to it, because press, they're they have to, like, they can write about whatever they want to in a lot of cases, but they have to have like a reason why. There's so much competition for that space. The good thing is they need something every day. It's not like they can write a story and then, oh, okay, I did my job, I'm gonna go take a vacation. They need content every single day. And so they're going to be looking for you. They're going to be looking for these interesting stories. Have a hook. A lot of times people will write to me and say, hey, can you help me get into Fast Company, or can you help me get on TechCrunch or something like that? And they'll just send me like information about their company. And I'm like, that's great, but that's not their job. Their job isn't just to talk about the company and be they're not your marketing team. They're press, and they need to have a story. I would also, so if we can kind of structure a story, or at least plan for one, say, hey, I know something's going to happen in 3 months. We can start doing some outreach now and really do the work for them. Yeah. Kind of craft what the story is and then how they might cover it. And a lot of press people have their information, their contact information available because they want that steady stream of deal flow. Another thing to remember, and anybody who is press, who's watching now or who will hear this, who I know, as friendly as press can be, they are not your friends. So don't conflate the two. Their job is to be friendly so that they can get the your comfortable information from you, but they're not your friends. Now, I have a lot of people that have been covering me for a long time who I consider to be very reputable people and very cool people, and one day we'll be friends, but that has to be how you treat it. And that's the kind of advice I gave my team when they started getting press, is that is their job, and then they sort of pull that information from you, and it's they're transparent about it. It's just something that you figure out.
For sure. Sandy is asking a question about the process of your book, and doing your book, and if you have any thoughts or advice on self-publishing versus getting a book deal, and your experiences.
So my book, I don't know how to compare it to too many other books, but one thing is very important to note is that it was co-written. So Rachel Nelson is my co-writer. I've known Rachel since I was in my early 20s. So we've known each other almost half of my life. She has never written a book before, so I didn't have a reason to think that she could, but her writing, her prose writing and her poetry were just always so impressive to me. She also spent a lot of time in the States, because she's from the UK. She spent a lot of time in the States studying Black history as her major. And so I liked that angle of it, and I liked her perspective. So just to be clear, it was a true co-write. I was not a ghostwrite, which a lot of people ask me if it was ghostwritten. I don't think you can talk the way I do. You can't train someone to talk the way that I do. So it was definitely co-writing, but it helped so much because of my schedule. So sometimes you get really excited about writing a book, but then it just lingers for years and years and years because you just can't find the time. And what I thought before, what I learned in this process, is I thought that, okay, even with the co-writer, even with someone with the schedule, I'll say that on Wednesdays I'm going to write, and then I'll be able to write on Wednesdays. That does not happen. You don't just figure out what to say on Wednesdays. It actually has to come to you, and it actually has to kind of, it's almost like writing music. It doesn't just happen because you tell it to happen. So having that flexibility is really important too, even with structure. And then it was a very conscious decision to put Rachel's name on the front of the book and to recognize her as a co-writer and not a ghostwriter. And we have an economic relationship with the book. That's important to do, to be smart about how you arrange that. And I don't think that, I didn't self-publish. My mom has self-published in the past, and we've enjoyed that experience because she can kind of control more. But it is like taking on venture funding or not. Mm-hmm. So there are sacrifices to being with the publisher. I'm with a major publisher. I'm with Penguin Random House in their business imprint. There's a sacrifice of, they kind of have ownership over certain things, or certain things I can't do with the IP that I would like to do, but they have ownership of it because I very willingly and knowingly said, okay, I'm selling that. But on the flip side, I got an advance. And so I was able to use some of the advance for different things at Backstage, and to work with Rachel and all those types of things that money allows, the freedoms that it gives. But ultimately, most people are going to get advances that are anywhere between $5,000 and $50,000 paid over 2 years or so in 4 or 5 increments, even from a major publisher. So think about that when you're not going to be necessarily the outlier who gets a lot more. And so think about, is the sacrifice worth it? Another pro though is, hey, I'm in all these stores. I didn't have to fight to be in these stores. If I have an idea, I can go to a 12-person team and tell them my idea, and somebody might be able to make it happen. There are a lot of people rooting for you. And then the independent side again is, maybe there's a strategy around it. If your goal is not necessarily to sell a bunch of books, but to let it be a lead generator for speaking or for getting you customers at your company, especially your SaaS company, then you might want to hold on to your book, sell it the way you want to, and turn it into a gift or turn it into a freebie that leads you into something else. So it just depends on why you want to write the book and what you want to use it. What tool will it be used for?
Is great, excellent advice. There are multiple questions coming in for both Christina, Felicia, several others about what your inner dialogue sounds like to yourself, especially when you're facing really challenging times. And I know
British accent.
I know for me, I'm like rah cheerleader to everyone else, but if you were in my head, you'd be hearing like, "You suck, you're worthless." I'm like, I don't know why I talk to myself that way, but how do you, what is your inner dialogue and how do you boost yourself?
I used to feel that way. Inner dialogue today is, "Oh, this is difficult. Oh, they don't know." And also, "Oh, you did it. Okay, you did it. You did it." And then something, most days I force myself to look back on the day and say, "What did you accomplish?" Because most days I go to bed with anxiety. It's just how I've been most of my life. I like during the day I'm okay, but at night I just get anxious. And I'm forced myself before I go to sleep to say, "Okay, what did you accomplish? You did a lot today. So let's go through that list." And I don't say "you suck" to myself today because I've just seen too much, Randy. I've seen too many people who are mediocre, just with every privilege in the world and just skating by. And I know I am not in that category. So, and most people I've met aren't. But it takes a while. Also, I'm a big fan of therapy. I'm not currently in it, but I've been in it in the past, and I will probably be in it again. And that's super helpful. And I think that taking a stigma away of therapy for everybody, men, women, other cultures, etc., it's very important.
For sure.
But also, I do want to make sure it is in a British accent, that my inner dialogue.
That's great. Maybe I just need to get a cool accent for my inner
I
dialogue.
think that'll be helpful.
It'll feel better.
It'll be helpful. You're like,
It's like
"Oh,
Scottish.
yeah," because you can like respond. Like, "You
That's
suck."
right.
"Oh, do I? Do I really?"
Oh my gosh, I love that. Melanie raises a really good question about how health insurance is one of the biggest reasons that especially people of color don't start their own businesses. And
Mhm.
I'm curious your thoughts on that, especially, I don't know if you've seen any incubators or funds that are offering services or have any tips or advice.
Well, I hear you. The first time I ever had health insurance as an adult was at the top of 2018 when we got it at Backstage, and it was. I think a lot of people at Backstage did not believe that I was having the reaction I was having, but I was really, really emotional and touched by it because the fact that not only could I have it, but could offer it to other people, it just blew my mind. So I really understand the health insurance thing. Today, there are companies, and I'll shout out Gusto. There are others, but Gusto has been super, super cool to work with. That if you can have 2 or 3 employees and get on health insurance through it, you can start small and grow as a small company. And so I would look into. I think we might be stuck a little bit in the past because in the past it was harder, but today there are a lot of options. Gusto being a front runner, and we've even thought about the idea of when there are things that do take a lot of people to start, but it's for medium and larger size companies. Could we get our portfolio on it? And so we have those types of perks for a lot of things. But yeah, I would say go to check out, just say Gusto, and then choose 2 other alternatives that you can match it against to see what the best deal is, and see, does it take, I think in some of these it takes 2 people. You can't be by yourself, but it takes a second person. So is there someone you can give a salary to as you build who's very helpful to you, including perhaps a family member?
Great advice. I love this question coming in from Emily. She's asking, have you ever heard no from someone and then ended up changing that no to a yes?
All the time. I mean, I'm just being honest, like all the time. I'm a good negotiator, but I try to hear people's no for what they are. Like I try to, there's a couple of kinds, like I don't want it to be like I'm pressuring someone and they're changing their minds because I was just so darn good at changing their minds if they really were a no, right? You have to listen to it. What I think sometimes people mistake when I say, don't, don't let one no stop you. I don't mean from the same person. I mean, just keep asking other people so that you don't annoy this one person over and over again. But yeah, there have been plenty of times, I'm sure people, some people here have heard that from me, where they they just needed more information. Or they just needed more time to see that I was real and that I wasn't a tourist or fly by night, flash in the pan, etc. A lot of times people come into this kind of orbit and they think that I'm some sort of, they just have weird ideas about me because they see something, and then they talk to me for like 15 minutes. Like, oh, actually you're working. Oh, okay, this is like actual strategic stuff that's happening. It's not just a podcast here and a headline there.
Patricia's asking, what's on your reading list or your podcast list right now? How can we learn by what you're learning from?
Well, a lot of the podcasts. I mean, I listen to Pod Save America every week. That's kind of the only one that I definitely have to catch every week. I also watch Rachel Maddow every night, and if I don't catch her, I listen to her podcast. I'm also, I mean, there's no episode of Oprah that she puts out that I won't find and listen to. But I will say I actually, in my academy, in my course, I list this particular podcast, and people think that I'm kidding, but I am not, as a business podcast. And it is Dolly Parton's America from 2019. It is a series that was done about her with her involvement. And you have to listen to the full first episode to understand how good it is. And Dolly has always been a great case study to me for a business acumen and not reinventing herself. I don't think she ever reinvented herself, but like staying true to herself, certainly, and being sustainable through decades and decades and being very strong-minded as a woman in a industry run by men, as a blonde, as a kind of a sex figure, sex symbol, but on her own terms. So the podcast is outrageously good. I also think, and this is a Republic shout out, kind of, Naval's podcast about angel investing. Sorry, not the angel investing one. The one about building wealth. It's called How to Get Rich, whatever, but he meant it to be called about wealth. And it's from like a year. It's like a couple of years old. But it is so. It's really good. I mean, I think people either love it or hate it. People either think it's kind of pompous, or they get a lot of value from it. I happen to be someone who gets a lot of value from it. So that's one to check out, Naval.
Wonderful. And I have to say that I've always really admired Dolly also. And so I'm a huge fan as well there.
Oh, and grab What I Know for Sure by Oprah. Just grab it. Just have it. Read it every year. You'll see something different that resonates with you every single year.
Absolutely. All right, we're in the final few minutes together. The hour flew by, Arlen. I could talk to you all day. So this question from Heather, I think, is a great one to end on, and then I want to give you a few minutes just to remind everyone where they can follow you and find you and book you and everything. Heather's asking, what do you wish people asked you about your story or experience that they don't?
Some people do. I just I love talking about I love when people understand that there's a major strategy going on, that it's not so fluffy as it might seem to some people. Like really, like it's I don't know how many dimensional chess it is. It's a long game, but it's also stacked, right? And so just kind of those strategic conversation, I think is good. Like even somebody I saw in the Q&A asked about SPACs, and I think most people would not think to ask me about SPACs because they don't think I'm in that lane but I study every day, and I'm planning years out. And so, of course, I've looked at specs and have an opinion of it. Don't have time to talk about it right now, but those types of questions. Yeah.
I know there were so many good questions that came in that
There were plenty. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Randy. You're able to like have a conversation and check out all these posts at the same time. It's really
oh
cool.
no, it's great. I mean, Arlen, you're giving such great, just honest answers to everything, which I so appreciate. I wish we could get to every single person's question here. I'm so sorry if we didn't. But Arlen, remind us, where can we buy your book? How can we most support you? And what are a few actions all of us can
So
take?
you can buy the book any independent store. If they don't have it, ask them to get it because they can get it within days. Amazon, itsaboutdamntime.com also has lots of options. It's available a lot of places around the world now. And also, if you want to bulk buy, because that's kind of cool, a lot of companies now in the past 6 months have been buying 50, 100, 1,000, and even more than 1,000 at a time for their employees or for major book clubs or things like that. And that goes a really long way in getting the word out about it. If you have any of that, if you're interested in that, on itsaboutdamntime.com, there is a bulk buy get in touch button. You can also find me at Arlen Was Here on Instagram and Twitter, which is what I spend most of my time on. I'm not a very trendy person, so I'm on Clubhouse, but I don't spend a lot of time there. And, it takes me a while to get onto things. And my podcast is Your First Million. And I'm very excited about what we're doing at Your First Million. So check it out.
Awesome. Arlen, this has been incredibly valuable. I know any time that I can get with you is always just an incredible gift. So thank you so much. Keep doing the great work that you're doing. And I, hope we can all support you.
I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Piali, for hosting this.
Thanks, Republic. Go to republic.co.
And of course, you can find Randy. You can find Randy at Randy Zuckerberg across all social media, and at SheWorx and at Republic and at Arlen Was Here. So thank you guys so much. Thank you both for being here. We're so honored. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much.